West Reading was rocked literally and figuratively last week by an explosion in a building of the R.M. Palmer Company. Many people are still dealing with the emotional and financial effects of this tragedy and will be for quite some time. If you are interested in helping relief efforts for the victims, the Berks County Community Foundation has set up a place where you can donate. Please see the description of this video for that link. This is a sensitive time as the community seeks answers about the cause of what led to the loss of 7 employees and injuries to several more. My goal is not to speculate on that, but I do have the ability to tell the full comprehensive history on the buildings involved and their significance in the community. Despite being less than 2 miles away at the Shillington Farmers Market when the explosion occurred, I felt and heard nothing. It wasn't until I got home after 5 p.m. that I found out the way I assume the majority of you did, from social media, particularly an update at the top of my Facebook feed which was trending from fire alerts of Berks County. I immediately took to Google Maps and punched in the address provided by that post, dropped into Street View and observed the structure. My first observation was that those buildings were very old. The first 24 hours were chaotic as it related to the spread of images and information on social media. I cannot even imagine what navigating that was like for current employees or loved ones of employees. In the following days, I kept up with West Reading Borough's public updates to the situation. In one press conference, Mayor Kaag also acknowledged that Palmer's has been a long-standing corporation in the borough. To be exact, R.M. Palmer Sr. purchased both the building that exploded and the main plant next door in 1958. The candy factory has historical significance in addition to its longevity. R.M. Palmer Sr., the founder of the company, patented the process for making those hollow molded chocolate bunnies in 1950. In fact, in 1955, Palmer's brought a lawsuit against another local giant candy manufacturer, Luden's Candy, for infringing on that patent. Palmer's ended up winning and Luden's was made to pay compensation. Again, to me these buildings look like they predated 1958. A few things jumped out to me when observing these structures in Street View, one being that the building destroyed had the same decorative cornerstone as the 156 Penn Ave structure. So what's their story? How old are they? My first step, even before diving into deeds, was to look at some old aerial photos to confirm their pre-Palmer's existence. This 1931 Hagley Digital Archives image shows all of them vividly in the same form they existed in before the explosion. For context moving forward, I'm going to refer to the structures as Building 1, Building 2, and 156 Penn Avenue. The Narrow Fabrics Company, under the umbrella of Berkshire Industries, which stood right up Penn Avenue in the old Vanity Fair complex, sold Building 2 to Palmer in 1958. The deed previous to this was in 1944, when a Wyomissing Glazed Paper Company purchased the property. Wyomissing Glazed Paper Company was founded in 1917, and a January 21, 1939 Reading Times article mentioned that they made wrappers for Hershey candy bars. This is interesting to note considering that the initial reports were that Building 2 was used to make and package Palmer's small chocolate eggs. A 1936 lease indicated that Wyomissing Glazed Paper Company was also renting the building on the northeast corner of 2nd and Franklin, what is now Building 1 of Palmer's. However, this lease referred to it as the Sharp Building. The Sharp Building was built in 1915 by a man named William A. Sharp. In an interesting twist, he purchased the lot of ground bounded by Franklin, 2nd, Cherry, and the railroad tracks from William Luden. Luden could not possibly have known that his lot would one day become the home to a rivaling confectioner who would sue his company. R.M. Palmer Sr. wouldn't be born for another 5 years. However, William Luden would live just long enough to see Palmer's founding in 1948. This makes Building 1, formerly known as the Sharp Building, 108 years old. William Sharp was a civic leader and head of Sharp Construction Company. He built quite an empire buying land and developing it during one of the most industrial periods in Reading's and America's history. He also was responsible for residential development, most specifically in the areas of Eckert Avenue, Clymer Street, and the northern section of Reading. Correct in my original assumption that the buildings once belonged together, the deeds for 156 Penn Ave and Building 2 converge back in 1929. In 1929, both buildings were sold to a West Reading title and trust company. This banking operation was short-lived. It lasted until 1933 when it was absorbed by the Reading National Bank and Trust Co. That deed transfer in 1933 read, "All that certain brick store, parentheses, formerly banking room, and apartment building, and the 2-story brick office and warehouse building." While filming this footage, I spoke with a woman whose family had a business in the basement of the 156 Penn Ave property for 3 decades. Her sister confirmed there are 2 vaults built into the first floor and basement of the 156 Penn Ave building. Some of you may have noticed the antiquated vault alarm apparatus on the west side of the building. It's a nearly century-old vestige of this institution. The further back in time I dove in deeds, the more interesting this story became. In the 1910 deed to a Louis Schiffner, the structure is described as a 3-story hotel building and stable. What? A hotel and stable? This 1926 Hagley photo confirms the existence of a different structure behind the hotel. The angle isn't great, but the stable is visibly smaller in footprint than Building 2. So was any of the stable utilized in the construction of Building 2? That I can't tell you for sure, but we can determine that Building 2 was at least 92 years old. It almost certainly proves that the West Reading Title and Trust Co. must have had this building heavily renovated or built when they purchased this property in 1929. Why though? I don't know. Perhaps they had some sort of agreement with the Wyomissing Glazed Paper Company that they would fill as a tenant. But there's still a mystery to solve with the corner building facing Penn Avenue. A deed in 1891 described the property as a 2-story hotel and lot, which means an entire story was added between this and the 1894 deed. In fact, the first deed I could find for this property, which indicates it was only a lot, was the 1873 deed between Frederick Frill, the man who subdivided West Reading, and a man named James Matz, a carpenter and home builder. I was able to confirm through Reading Times newspaper archives that Matz ran his business from this property shortly after purchase, and later ran a hotel on this site. The first mention of the hotel was in 1889, when the residents of West Reading legally fought the license because they thought another hotel would attract unsavory behavior. There are sections of 156 Penn Ave that are 2 stories. The brickwork is patchy, indicating many additions and changes over that 150 years. I am not a brick expert, but to me it looks like the facade was added and the line of brick in this image shows where a 3rd-story addition could have taken place in 1894. We can determine with this information that at least parts of 156 Penn Ave are roughly 150 years old. It's kind of fascinating to think that this building spent 50 years as a hotel. That's a significant amount of time by our perception, yet no one alive today would remember it in that function. All of the buildings on the block of 2nd Avenue between Penn and Franklin have been condemned, at least for the time being, until they can be proved safe to occupy. Only time will tell if they and the history that they represent will be additional casualties to this catastrophic event.